Good morning, and welcome to First Edition, the online ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles. I'm the senior minister here in this amazing congregation, and we are thrilled that you've joined us on this day for worship. We want you to know, no matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcome and accepted here as you are. Right now there's a QR code up on the screen. We'd love for you to register your attendance, give for the offering, and even submit a prayer concern if you have one. Also, there's two links there with that QR code where you can click on those links, and that'll take you to the newsletter of our church and also to our email that I send out every Friday. We'd love for you to know more about what's going on in the life of our congregation. Today, my sermon is titled, Grace at Work. It's based on a teaching from Jesus where he says to his disciples, and by extension to us, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, that much faith, it's 1/32 of an inch. I looked it up. If you have just that much faith, that's enough to get you through life. If you can stand together. Really had fun with this sermon. I'm looking forward to sharing with you. Let's worship now.
Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus is the best thing I've ever done. In His arms I feel protected. In His arms never disconnected. In His arms I feel protected. There's no place I'd rather be. Falling in love with Jesus, yes. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus is the best thing I've ever done. In His arms I feel protected. In His arms never disconnected. In His arms I feel protected. There's no place I'd rather be. The best thing I've ever done. In His arms I feel protected. In His arms never disconnected. In His arms I feel protected. There's no place I'd rather be. No, there's no place I'd rather be. Ooh, there's no place I'd rather be. There's no place I'd rather be. No place I'd rather be in the arms of my Jesus. No place I'd rather be in the bosom of my blessed, in the master of the key. No place, no place, no place, no place. There's no place
Have you ever noticed how difficult Jesus' teaching can be? I mean, consider the Sermon on the Mount, which is almost 90% of it is in the Sermon on the Plain in the Gospel of Luke, which Dave just read for us. In those two sermons, or maybe it's one sermon just remembered in different places, in that sermon, Jesus has teachings like this: love your enemy. Pray for those who persecute you. If someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek and present it to them. Pick up your cross, an instrument of death, and follow Jesus. No wonder the disciples are filled with doubt. No wonder they're overwhelmed with worry. No wonder they're saying to Jesus, increase our faith. We need more faith. Jesus, please give us more faith somehow. These teachings are so difficult. They're so hard. There's another teaching that came just a few verses before the text we heard read today. And maybe this is what Jesus is responding to, what the disciples are feeling overwhelmed by. It's a parable about a rich man who owned a huge estate, and he had a wall along the borders of that estate that was there primarily to keep people out, although there was a gate that people could use to go in and out into his estate. There was a man at that gate named Lazarus, not Jesus' friend Lazarus, another person. This is a parable, a story that Jesus is telling. Lazarus is at that gate where he begs for food every day. Most of the time, he's not given anything. Basically, the rich man ignores him. And then, coincidentally, they both die on the same day. The rich man and the poor man named Lazarus. Jesus says in his story that the poor man is picked up by angels and transported to heaven, to the bosom of Abraham. And the rich man is sent to Hades. The rich man apparently can see up into heaven and can see this Lazarus and Abraham, and he calls out and cries out for a cup of cold water, and he's rejected. It's a strange teaching. It's a strange, unusual way to try to inspire his disciples. But what Jesus is saying is what we think is up is really down, and what we think is down is really up. He's essentially saying to them, pay attention to what matters the most in your life. It's not your 401k or your income or the address on your home. What matters more than those things, they matter, but what matters more than those things are the love and grace you receive and give away. It's the hope that energizes your soul. Those things mean so much more. And here the disciples are somewhat overwhelmed by this. It just seems like everything is topsy-turvy. What's up is down. What's down is up. There's these instructions to love your enemy, to turn your cheek. It all feels so strange. Lord, give us faith. Increase our faith. They're overwhelmed by doubt that they can really live up to these teachings. May I say today, I understand. There's something about the last 10 years or so that has caused my faith at times to feel tiny, small, insignificant. There are days, and it seems like it's been tougher the last few years even, when I'm just overwhelmed with doubt. This was an off-the-cuff remark at the 9 o'clock service, but sometimes I think my title here is Senior Minister of Worry. I worry about this and that and the other thing, and then once those things are taken care of, I start worrying about something else and that other thing back over there again. And you may judge me for being a pastor and being this open on a Sunday morning about my own doubt and a sincere lack of faith at times, but I know I'm not alone. I've talked with some of you here in the hallways at First Community North, over in my office, not too far from here, at South, the hallways and the offices there, sometimes over coffee, over a late meal. And I've heard you say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm filled with worry. I want to believe in God, but I just don't know. And so in this moment, we want to cut the disciples some slack. I mean, they've been with Jesus for 3 years, and if you read the Gospel of John, it might be as long as 10 years. Whether it's 3 years or 10 years, it doesn't matter. They've been with Jesus every day. They've had Rabbi Jesus, the guy around whom an entire world religion with billions of followers would be created. And here they've got him every single day, and they're hearing his teachings. They're in his presence. They're witnessing this life and the way he lives it. But even still, based on our own experiences, we can understand. I almost want to go over to James and John and Peter and give them a hug and say, it's okay, we're together in this. Sometimes I wish I had the faith that my 9-year-old self had. When I was 9, I was certain about the answers. I knew the Bible. I thought I understood some pretty serious stuff. And when I was 9 years old, I decided I wanted to be baptized. In the church that I attended at 9, they didn't do infant baptism like we do, which is a theologically beautiful and wonderful act. But in that church, they did what's called believer's baptism. And that they expected that after an age of accountability, then you would make a decision on your own and choose to decide to confess your faith and then enter the waters of baptism. That age of accountability in that church was 12. Later, my own 12-year-old self would look back at this moment and think, boy, what are they doing setting it at 12? That's another story. But my 9-year-old self, I wanted to follow Jesus. I loved Jesus. I started believing in Jesus probably when I was 4 or 5. I'd come to church, sit on the front row. My dad would be in the pulpit. My mom would lead the choir. She led the choir at many of the churches that my dad served. And my favorite song, you can guess, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. That song became one I'd sing every night trying to fall asleep. I wanted to follow Jesus, and sometimes I'd love to get back in touch with that 9-year-old faith, that simple but clear, certain faith that God would be with me always. And so maybe we should cut the disciples some slack here in this less than powerful moment for them. Or maybe we shouldn't. I love reading the work of Rachel Held Evans. She wrote a sermon on this text, and she helped me see something I hadn't seen before. She says that Jesus' response isn't anything like a pastor's. He's not Pastor Jesus, he's Rabbi Jesus. He's Professor Jesus. He's their teacher. He's their leader. He's their Messiah. And he's going to cut through all that stuff to get to a real strong point. He's basically saying, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed. Do you know how big a mustard seed is? Anybody know? 1/32 of an inch. Sometimes they're as large as 1/16. So even the largest is tiny. It's that big. Jesus is kind of irritated with them. Rachel says he's getting a little snarky with them. He's kind of irritated by them. He wants to get them to understand, if you had faith this big, just that much, that's enough. That would be enough for you to do amazing things, to get through this world and do all sorts of wonderful things if you just had that much. But they're overwhelmed. They're filled with worry. They can't believe. And Jesus says, listen, if you had faith, you could command this mulberry tree over here to uproot itself and fly on down to the lake at Camp Akita and root itself there in that beautiful spot. If you had even the faith of a mustard seed. What he's trying to get them to understand is that they have enough, but they're so stuck. They're so overwhelmed. They can't quite get there with him. You see, they've confused faith with certitude. They want to know. They want to have it clear. They want to understand completely what's really going on here. It's Walter Brueggemann, the great Old Testament theologian, though, who says, we confuse faith with certitude all the time. The gospel is not about certitude. It's not about having the answers. It's not about knowing how to answer the wisest, most difficult theological questions ever. No, the gospel is about fidelity. It's about being faithful to the teachings of Christ, of allowing that faith, hope, and love to emerge in your soul and be shared with the rest of the world. We think it's about certitude, but it's not. It's about having just enough faith to let that grace be at work in you. And then Rachel really helped me understand more about this text and what's going on with the disciples here. She reminded me that a few verses before, in another story, the disciples have returned from witnessing and teaching about Jesus and the gospel in a small village. They were rejected by the entire village. And they came back to Jesus and said, Lord, can you give us the power to call down fire from heaven to destroy this village? And Jesus basically looks at them and says, that is about as far away from my teaching as you could possibly be. We're going to have to do some extra credit work here so you can understand. And Rachel says what they're looking for really wasn't faith. In this moment, Jesus is remembering that experience. What they're looking for is not faith. They're looking for flash. They're looking for a miracle and the ability to do miracles. They're looking for the ability to be not average or above average, but to be number one, to be on the top of the list. We can maybe say that at the heart of who they are, they want to do something good in the world. They want to feel important. They want to do important things. They want to be able to turn the world around, bring it to a new direction. They're certain if they can just get the power to do miracles, we don't need faith, we just need some flash. My 9-year-old self understood that too. A few weeks after I was baptized, I joined the FBI club in my church. It's a true story. Do you know what FBI stood for? No FBI club members here? We were the Faithful Bible Investigators. And if you can learn all the stories of the Bible, from Moses to King David to Jesus to the Apostle Paul, if you can learn all those stories and some of the memory verses and pass the test at each level, you could move up from inspector all the way to special director. You are looking at Special Director Glenn Miles from the FBI club. I loved being number one. I loved being up at the top. I thought I was in charge of everybody once I got that title. Then in the 5th grade, we moved to a new church, but they had a similar kind of ministry. And there, for the 5th and 6th graders, they had what was called the Jet Cadets for Jesus Club. It was the same kind of thing. You would move up in rank from captain to the next, to the next, to the next, all the way up to commander in the Jet Cadets for Jesus. We are Jet Cadets for Jesus. We are pilots for our Lord. We are on the beam for heaven and will fly with one accord. It gets worse from there. You know who rose up to become commander faster than anybody else in the history of that church's Jet Cadets for Jesus Club? You're looking at Commander Glenn Miles, Jet Cadet for Jesus. I love being number one. I love being at the head of the class. I love being there until something terrible happened. Lester Smathers joined our group. That's his name. That's his real name. I'm not making that up. My mom's watching. She can tell you. That was the guy, Lester Smathers. He joined our group. And then he became commander faster than me. It was a terrible day. My faith was destroyed. And even our teacher, Mrs. Schwartz, referred to him as Commander 1. I was Commander 2. It was just breaking my heart. Well, I want you to know what we did in the Jet Cadets Club. Every Sunday night at 5 o'clock, we'd gather in the park across the street from the church, where we'd play volleyball or football or softball or some fun game. Then after the game was over at 5:30, we'd go in and the whole congregation would be gathered for a fellowship meal. It would go about 30 minutes. There'd be adults there, children and youth. Then at 6, the adults would go to the Bible study and the kids would go to their age groups. Their 3rd and 4th graders at one, 5th and 6th at another, junior high and high school. You can understand. And it was a great fun thing. One Sunday night, I noticed about 5 minutes to 5, as we were heading across the street to go to the park, Lester Smathers was dropped off by his parents. And then they drove away. They didn't stay for the Bible study. I said, Lester, where are your parents going? He said, they go out to dinner on Sunday nights. They drop me off at Jet Cadets Club so they can have dinner together. I said, really? Are they members of the church? And he said, no. I couldn't believe this. I was in shock. They're not members of the church. They just dropped their kid off. He's not a member either. And yet he comes to Jet Cadet Club and he becomes a commander? This is wrong. So I wrote an anonymous letter to my dad, the pastor. And I said, Dear Dad, I do not believe that children whose parents are not members of our church should be able to attend our church. Love, your son. My dad called me into his office that week, and he said, Glenn, your idea of what a church should be is about as far away from what Jesus wants to be as you could possibly be. You see, I wanted the flash. I wanted to be number one. I wanted to be on top of the world. I wanted to be first. I wanted a miracle. I wanted some miracle to come and happen and make me better than Lester somehow. I was looking for a miracle. But miracles don't change us. Miracles don't change us as much as we may want one. In my experience as a pastor, miracles don't always change us. It's a rare thing that it happens. When a miracle occurs or you think it's a miracle. Do you remember a plane taking off at LaGuardia in January of 2009? The pilot's name was Captain Sullenberger. Do you remember? Almost immediately after takeoff, they hit a flock of birds. They lost the power in all the engines. Captain Sullenberger knew immediately that they were in danger. He did the calculations quickly in his mind as he became a quickly dropping glider, gliding with no power. Can I make it back to LaGuardia? No, was his conclusion. Can I make it to the right of the plane where Teterboro Airport is? No, was his conclusion. All he thought he could do is make it to the Hudson River. So he glided that plane gently and ever so carefully. The people on board didn't know what was happening other than they were getting lower and lower and closer to the water. And then the captain said, "Brace for impact." It was amazing, unbelievable, the way that plane gently landed on the water and then stayed afloat long enough for every single person to be rescued. There were a couple of broken bones, some bumps, and some scratches, but no one died. What did they call it? The miracle on the Hudson. Amazing, unbelievable. A few weeks later, some researchers interviewed most of the passengers who were on that plane. And they asked them, is this experience going to change your life? Oh, absolutely. Well, what are you going to do? I'm going to worry less about work. I'm not going to obsess over my job. I'm going to pay more attention to the people I love and give myself away to my family and to my wife, my spouse, my parents, my children, whoever it might be. I'm going to take up a new hobby and learn knitting or crocheting. I'm going to volunteer in the community more. I'm going to do other things I can to help change the world and make it a better place. A year later, the researchers came back. What did they discover? A few kept that promise. The overwhelming majority had gotten busy at work. They'd gotten back into their same routines. They obsessed over their job. They didn't pay as much attention to their family. They forgot to tell their spouse they love them. And the next thing you know, it's like the miracle never happened, because miracles don't change us. We don't need a miracle, Jesus is saying. All we need is 1/32 of an inch of faith. Just that much, just this much faith. That's what we need. That will get us through. That's more than enough. And think about this. Think about this. If you and I bring whatever faith we have, maybe you have a pumpkin seed faith. Maybe yours is a sunflower seed faith. I don't know, but whatever size it is, if we bring whatever faith we have to this place and together stand with all of who we are, our doubts, our questions, our worries, our fears, our anxieties too, bring them. Bring your whole self. But if we do that and we come together in this space, in this church, in this community, we will become the miracle that God is calling on us to be. We will be the miracle that God needs in this world. We will be the miracle in this community. We will be the miracle in each other's lives. If we can stand with courage and faith, hope, and love at the center of who we are, our voices will be strong enough to face any voices of hatred in this world, any voices of fear, and any voices of dishonesty. If we'll bring just that much, we're the miracle that God is calling us to be. Let it be so.